We should be live, and there's a little bit of a delay on it. But yeah, there we go. All right. And I've got this muted so I don't get a bunch of feedback, but if y'all are in the chat there, let me know if the audio is good or not, and we'll take it from there. But yeah, welcome everybody. I'm Matt from the Open Economy Initiative. I'm joined today by my co-founder Chill and our friend Daniel from Bitfi at the hardware wallet that we're going to be learning more about. And yeah, should be a good session. It's kind of middle of the day, but we'll still get it done. So yeah, before we launch into it, I'm going to just do a quick little bit about the OPI. If you're not familiar with us, Chill and I are the Open Economy Initiative. We're primarily on a mission to promote crypto commerce. We're doing that through education. We've got some links to some Udemy courses and some other great resources. If you're interested, reach out to us. And we do a lot of these cool live streams. Chill's been tearing it up with the Monero community and big privacy advocates. So yeah, we're all about holding the custody of your cryptocurrency and privacy and self-sovereignty and all that fun stuff. So yeah, that being said, Daniel, welcome to the stream. It's great to have you, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited to ask you a bit about the Bitfi. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about the project, and then we're probably just gonna see where the conversation takes us.
Okay. Well, I'm primarily, just, I'm a co-founder, and I got involved in funding the project. Okay, so I don't really work like on the technical side or anything like that. Really, the story of Bitfi really came to be from kind of, addressing our own personal need, right? Because I got started out in investing in Bitcoin, like, several years ago, back when, the only solution was like, you had these paper wallets and then conventional hardware wallets, and none of those solutions really kind of gave me this feeling like, okay, I can really, not worry about it. I can put most of my net worth in, cryptocurrency or just keep it all in Bitcoin and not have anything to worry about. And so the solutions were just simply were not foolproof enough, not secure enough, or kind of some of the stuff that is, I would say, has adequate security is just extraordinarily complex for the average person. It's just completely unrealistic to expect the average person to use. And even for a very experienced individual, it would be still very, I would say, inconvenient. That they would face a lot of hardship, and there's many situations in which it doesn't really quite work. And so we're just looking for something foolproof where you can, where I could, because I keep most of my net worth in Bitcoin and other, a few other digital assets, and this was the answer. Okay, and it is a very disruptive, very different kind of technology. It's completely different. So, and really, I would say that we were the first company to think of this from kind of this opposite perspective, where everyone is thinking about, okay, storing my private keys. How do I store my keys and keep them secure? Okay, that's kind of the conventional thinking. That's what everyone was thinking about. And our approach was, okay, let's not store anything. Let's just delete them, right? If you have nothing stored, there really isn't anything to attack. Okay, I mean, just from without getting into like all kinds of, computer science and, the specifics of the technology, is just kind of this elegant idea, a concept that's really, not hard to understand, that if you take the most sophisticated piece of hardware, Okay, from, usually these are like, gadgets that cost, $100 or whatever, or you go into millions, okay, and this hardware is storing critical data. This data is accessible. It can be extracted, and the more advanced the hardware, just the more difficult it is. And it's just a matter of, the sophistication of the underlying technology and time. Okay, with time, even kind of the most sophisticated things will be cracked, and the data will be accessed, right? Because technological innovation is moving forward. So this also forces you to constantly think about your security, how it changes with time. Perhaps what is adequate today may simply be totally inadequate 2 years from now, and you just can't stop thinking about it, right? So what is this elegant solution to kind of solve this problem once and for all? Well, if you take the cheapest piece of hardware, okay, something that is, literally imagine the lowest quality, cheapest possible piece of hardware that just doesn't have a trace of data, that is constantly formatted and wiped clean. There would be absolutely nothing that you can extract from this device, not because it has some extraordinary level of encryption or some, super duper new secure element or whatever. There just isn't anything to take. It's kind of like drilling into an empty safe. Why would you do that? Why would you bother? So that's kind of the underlying concept behind this technology. But also, some people they say, okay, well, so it's a brain wallet, right? This is kind of, well, no, it's not. I mean, there are also significant differences there because, if you've ever used a brain wallet, essentially it is something that allows you, to use some kind of application to turn some kind of phrase into a private key, then memorize that phrase, let's say it's for Bitcoin, and then at some point in the future, recreate that private key from that phrase. But then, you still need a wallet when you recreate that private key. So even though during that time you kept, your Bitcoin in your mind, at the time that you are like, okay, now I need to access that Bitcoin. Okay, I remember my phrase, and you go back to this application, you start, you type in your phrase, whatever, to calculate that one key. And then you expose yourself to all kinds of security risks, because here you are dealing with a computer, entering critical information into a computer. And in the process of creating and transferring that private key for that Bitcoin address, you expose yourself to dozens and dozens of serious security risks. And in terms of practicality is the simple fact that, I mean, you can't, transact, and you can't, do that with multiple currencies, with multiple addresses for one currency, right? Brain wallet doesn't allow you to, for example, store, 30 different digital assets, or, for example, store Bitcoin that sits at 100 different Bitcoin addresses in your mind. Bitfi does, right? So the entire Bitfi infrastructure, okay, so essentially the user creates a salt and a secret phrase, okay, which is basically two inputs, okay? I mean, it doesn't matter what we call them. I mean, the word salt, phrase, these are arbitrary words. What matters is that it is some kind of an alphanumeric input, okay, that is created by the user. And this input is then used to produce an output, which is always the same, and which is always going to be the private key for whatever currency or asset that you're using, okay? The same way, and probably, I like to use the calculator analogy because some people kind of have a hard time understanding what when in fact it's really not that difficult to understand. Essentially, when you take a calculator and you do 6 times 6 as the input, your output will be 36, right? Every time, no matter what calculator, no matter where in the world you might be, that input will always produce that same output, okay? So with Bitfi, it's the same. That input that you yourself have created will always produce the same output, which is always the private key for whatever currency, whatever address, public address of that currency that you're using, which also creates this, massive advantage that it's also not a device-dependent wallet. Okay, you're not tied to any hardware. It doesn't matter what hardware you use, right? So in other words, I'll give you several different examples. Okay, I'm going to quickly run through various things, and then I guess we can maybe get to, you can ask questions, we'll get in depth.
I've already got a bunch of questions.
Right. I'm sure. So for instance, let's say you have to travel, right? So if you take your typical, traditional hardware wallet, which is some kind of gadget, all right? Number one, you're going to definitely be very worried if you lost that device. You're going to be very, very concerned if that device gets seized or confiscated from you for whatever reasons. Let's say you're going through customs, or what, let's say you just lost it, okay? You're going to be absolutely panicking if, let's just say, let's say your entire life savings were on that device, okay? You would be absolutely terrified. And then, of course, you'd be thinking, okay, I'm away from my home, and in my home, I have this, backup, 24-word seed, and gosh, who has access to that? What if someone breaks into my house? What if my house burns down? Okay, you lost your wallet and your house burns down, or let's say you travel and leave the device at home and your house burns down, and both the seed and the device burn down, and then your money's gone forever, okay? With Bitfi, because it's not device dependent, okay, it doesn't matter if your device is stolen or confiscated or seized, because there's nothing on it, okay? It does the exact opposite of what every other wallet or technology does, which is all those devices, they store your seed or your private keys. This does the exact inverse. It instantly wipes, overwrites, and formats your device to return it back to its original state, which is exactly as it was brand new before you took it out of the box. Meaning that if you were to, for example, collect a device that you've been using for, 2 years every day, and then it gets sent to a forensic lab, and then you took another device that's brand new in a box and sent it to a forensic lab, there would be no possible way to distinguish between them. Both would appear completely unused with absolutely no data, because it's designed to do the opposite, to make sure, in other words, we've developed very advanced methods, okay, and proprietary, methods to memory management to make sure there's absolutely no trace of anything that you've ever typed on this device or that's ever been calculated by this device, okay? So in the case of travel, so let's just say, because it's not, again, returning to this idea of not being device dependent, is let's just say you have a home in New York and another, an apartment in Florida. You can have a device in one location and a device in the other. You can, once you get to the other, you just enter your Sultan phrase and you're interacting with your wallet. Same as, let's say, if I am sitting here and I have, 10 of these on my desk, I don't even, look at which one I'm taking because it's utterly irrelevant. I can grab any of these 10 devices. And why? Because the device is not the wallet, right? So essentially, Bitfi technology is kind of like a mind to blockchain interface, because all the funds only reside in your consciousness, right? There is no trace of anything on any hardware. And when you need to make a transaction, whatever you have in your mind, okay, which is the input, your Sultan phrase, gets translated into the appropriate, private keys or whatever it is that you need, any other type of cryptography that might be needed to perform the necessary operations on the blockchain. Okay, so this achieves a level of security and fulfills on the promise, right, of making Bitcoin an unconfiscatable asset, right? Because if you have right now millions of people around the world who have these, little gadgets with private keys, they don't have an unconfiscatable asset. They have something that's akin to having, bars of gold in a safe or a bunch of cash under a mattress. That's what you have when you're using that device, because extracting all the private keys from it is trivial. And of course, it's even more trivial to look, if I find a piece of paper with, or a metal plate with 24 words in your home or anywhere, what did I just find? Obviously, I just found a bunch of money, right? Because what else can it be? It's a standardized format, right? So that does not meet the definition or the, kind of the stated goal of, Bitcoin of being something that can't be confiscated. In other words, right now, the only thing that traditional hardware wallets achieve is they make it, they protect you from confiscation online, right? So you can't be attacked online because the keys aren't on your computer or whatever, or potentially compromised hardware. And so, signing takes place outside of the computer environment. But in any kind of, physical access, I mean, you don't really have any protection, right? So, and then, people have developed, certain techniques like, multi-sig, which is really, I think is kind of like a not a good solution, because number one is, the extraordinary, inconvenience that comes along with it. The fact that it wouldn't work for, it would only work for Bitcoin, right? So your multi-sig setup, wouldn't work for another digital asset that you need to secure. So that's just like, so then you end up having to deal with, a half a dozen different wallets or whatever, and then which just turns into a logistical nightmare. And then in a way, your security is essentially broken because, user error or whatever, these things are a major factor. And, this, 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3 or whatever with devices in multiple locations, I mean, it just doesn't, that's not, having to travel to multiple locations to send Bitcoin, that just doesn't make a lot of practical sense. I mean, so essentially with this technology, particularly with the advent of Bitfi 2, which was, released, now about 2 years ago, every, conceivable attack vector is addressed. There's really no way to attack your wallet. It's essentially, we've gotten into a point where, like, trying to obtain funds from your Bitfi 2 wallet is kind of like the same as, attacking the blockchain itself. I mean, you might as well do that because you would be faced with kind of the same level of difficulty there. So, so maybe I'll stop there. Maybe I'm, there's a lot more I want to say, but maybe I'll let you throw in some questions and, see where we go from there.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, as somebody, I mean, Chill and I both help. I mean, at this point, it's probably thousands of people on board into the crypto sphere, whatever you'd like to call it. And I mean, that's a huge, especially for older people and people that didn't grow up with tech. The difficulty of setting up a hardware wallet, securing the phrase, and just understanding kind of what you're doing, understanding enough of what you're doing to feel comfortable doing it, and then keeping it safe, I think is a huge barrier to entry. And that's, those are a lot of the people with the money to potentially invest in the cryptocurrency space are some of the older generation, and the current solutions I think are limiting the market there. So I mean, the way that you're making this sound is that it's very it's a lot easier to use. It's a lot more user friendly, which I yeah, would be awesome. That's something I think we're both very interested in learning more about. But I think my first question would be, and maybe you cover this, I don't know if I missed it or not, but the actual key sign. So when you're signing the transaction, so you've got your salt, you've got your seed phrase, your passphrase, I forget what you called it. Those two things are what the private key is derived for a specific cryptocurrency, and then that's what's used to sign the transaction. It gets broadcast, whatever. Am I right there, or am I off base?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
So you're running that input that you have created through an algorithm, right? So if you're trying to perform an operation on the Bitcoin blockchain, it runs through a Bitcoin algorithm. If you're trying to perform an operation on the Ethereum blockchain, it runs through an Ethereum algorithm, right? And the same input works for everything, right? So essentially, what's really great here, which I think is really, really important, is that the user is only left with only one thing that they ever need to think about, right? Which is making sure that you know your salt and phrase and that no one else does. That is literally the only way that you can compromise your funds or lose access or whatever. There's literally nothing else that could happen, right? Including Bitfi itself disappearing, or any possible scenario you can imagine, including a nuclear war or whatever, okay, that would compromise your funds. So you don't have to think about anything. You don't have to worry about, oh my God, did I do this firmware update correctly? Or, oh my God, I bought this device and I'm not sure, is it genuine? What if it's counterfeit? Or what if someone tampered with it while it was in transit? What if someone got to these factors are not a factor here. They're out the window, right? These issues are simply something that people using Bitfi 2 don't have to think about, because that's just how this technology works, right? So as long as you know that, so it's kind of like knowing, like a Bitcoin private key, which of course would be essentially impossible to memorize. But this is done in a format where the salt and phrase is something that you can remember, right? And by the way, it is not, I want to make it clear that it's not like a requirement that you need to memorize, the salt and phrase. The way that this infrastructure is designed and the way that the flow is designed is that you're using it so often that it just becomes really ingrained in your memory. Right, like you start to know it really well, like as well as like your social security number, perhaps better because of how it's used. But of course, there are people who may have, let's say, issues with, some people are paranoid that, what if I hit my head or something like that and I forget everything, right? What am I going to do? Well, okay, so in that case, you can write it down as well, right? And if you do that, then the funds in this scenario exist in two places. They exist in your mind and on that piece of paper where you wrote it down, right? If you happen to just, remember it like me, I don't have it written anywhere, right? It only exists in my mind, right? So it's kind of up to you. And some people kind of might start out with writing it down and then later deciding they'll destroy that copy or whatever because they just know it so well. But in either case, even if you do decide to write it down, okay, you still have a big advantage because it is not a standardized format, right? When I see 24 words, I know it's a wallet. When I see a random phrase, I don't know what it is, right? It's very hard to identify some random phrase as being a wallet, right? And so you still kind of have advantages in what you can do and how you can configure this and kind of really optimize it for your situation. But does that make sense? In other words, you have some kind of input, right? Which when you run it through an algorithm, it's kind of like a hash function, right? Like when you hash, like let's say if you were going to hash a sentence, the hash will be always the same, right? When you produce a hash, when you run, let's say you write something, like I like streaming on YouTube, right? And you run that through a hash, that number, the hash that'll be produced will always be the same exact number if you put in that same sentence each and every time, right?
Right.
So here you're getting that output, instead of being a hash, is a private key, right, to whatever it is that you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, you got one question, Chill? Go for it.
Yeah. So does Bitfi has any recommendation as to that phrase, because obviously, as we all know, the user is the weakest link, and if they come up with, very mainstream phrase, then
Password
that,
123.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, first of all, I don't know if I agree that the user is the weakest link. I think that a lot of wallets have like really, really serious vulnerabilities. I just want to comment on this, that are not understood, right? And people have a false sense of confidence in them. And that's why you hear every day where a person goes, I was using this wallet and I was, and I just, I lost everything, and this happens each and every day. Okay. As far as recommendations, yes. So there's two things. So first of all, absolutely. There is with the quick start guide comes with guidelines for how salt and secret phrase should be set. Okay, there are specific guidelines. This is very important. Okay, and we provide several different ways of doing it. Okay, and it's in terms of entropy is actually another thing that's very poorly understood. So in this case, randomness is way more important than length. Okay, but length also, of course, is important because when you come to purely trying to brute force something, length is important, and so there is a minimum character length that is required, right? So the device will simply not allow a user to use, let's say, a phrase that is shorter than, I believe, like something like 30 characters, for instance, right? And initially, some users were like, well, why do you do that? I mean, it should be my business. Like, if I want to take that risk and I want to just have a phrase that is 4 characters, why can't I do that, right? Well, obviously, the problem here is that, about 90% of the people who participate in the cryptocurrency space just simply are very new to this. They do not understand entropy. So we would definitely have a disaster on our hands if we, did that. So we had to set a certain minimum length, right? And the most important thing in terms of setting a phrase is to not use common expressions, right? So this
Right.
would be any kind of expressions that are in movies, songs, literature, commercials, anything like that, okay? Because those are extremely easy to crack because powerful actors, they use what's called rainbow tables, where they just will deploy billions of known phrases in like a second, right? So they're not actually brute forcing where a machine has to like keep guessing every possible combination, right? So that's the most important thing, is just not to use a common expression. And then we provide 2 ways, right? One is use what's called a diceware method. So the device actually comes with a die that you roll and a diceware word list, where you would randomly select, by rolling a die, you would randomly select 7 words, okay? This method, okay, is mathematically proven that even someone with the computational power of the NSA would need something like, at least 100 million years to brute force a phrase with 7 words selected from that list randomly, okay? However, that's not accounting for the salt, meaning that if an attacker was to miraculously, guess or crack the phrase, they wouldn't know that they cracked it because they have no way to test it, because they don't know the salt, which is also part of the required input, right? Because, the phrase by itself is meaningless because you have 2 inputs, salt and the phrase, and the salt is just another input with another set of characters, which could be another phrase, right? Or it could be 2 words or a string of numbers, whatever the user chooses. So what is often, I think, we encounter is misunderstood is that people sometimes assume, okay, well, since because my wallet is, the seed is 24 words, seems like you guys don't have enough entropy, right? Because this seems like this would be easier to brute force remotely, because, you know, it's 24 words versus you are recommending 7 words. Okay, but this is completely not true, because the BIP 39 format, okay, is where 24 words are selected from a list of 2,048 words, right? And that's it. And those words, okay, so it's all the possible combinations that a computer can come up with from that word list. In this format, if you're using Diceware, it is 7 words out of a list of over 7,000 words. Okay, so it's all the possible combinations of 7 words out of 7,000. But one major overlooked factor is that in BIP 39, the letters are not case sensitive, right? They're all, in other words, you know, you have 26 possible letters, as you have 26 letters in the English alphabet. However, here you have an open format, right? So you can have lowercase letters and uppercase letters, right? Which means that you now have 52 possible letters, not 26 letters, because lowercase plus uppercase, you have 52 possible letters. Then you have numbers and special characters, which of course are not used in BIP 39, right? So when you add in the entropy plus the salt, it is significantly higher than the entropy of those 24 words. Yet you have a phrase that is practical, where I mean, I know this for a fact as a user myself, and, you know, interacting with, you know, maybe several thousand people over the years who are users, that people know their Sultan phrase. They absolutely remember it and know it as well as their own name, right? Because this format just allows you to have something that you really can remember, and because it forces you to use it, because there is no like password for those other wallets where you need a password to access that device, right? And then you have the seed, which you maybe looked at once in your life, right, with 24 words. Here you're using the seed, right, for every single operation. For even if you just need to check your wallet balance, you need to enter your Sultan phrase. So this repetition just absolutely makes you know your Sultan phrase, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah, it gets hammered in there for sure. I think I mean the method of basically combining the inputs to create the output of your private key, so you can then sign the transaction. You mentioned you know, using an algorithm to generate it from those inputs. That algorithm, I guess the question that I would have, and I know that a lot of the people in our community would, or I think actually someone just asked it here, but if Bitfi, you know, worst case scenario goes away, is that algorithm open source? Do I still have access to that? Like, where am I going to take my if like Bitfi is no longer and my, you know, my device gets run over, how am I going to calculate that private key, like in a worst case scenario?
right, so when if you go on the login page, the first thing that we say in the, you know, there's a section titled important user notice. The first thing that we say is that the first thing that you need to think about as a user of this technology is, what will you do in this worst case scenario, right? What happens if one day to the next Bitfi disappears? Okay, gone. Okay, without the ability to have access to your funds, okay, this tech would be, you know, utterly useless. The whole purpose of, you know, be your own bank, right, is you cannot have third-party dependencies, period. Like, you cannot depend on anyone but yourself. If you find that you're depending on someone other than yourself, your wallet is useless. It's not a wallet, okay? It's some kind of a custodial service, okay? So yes, in this situation, it literally takes, you know, I mean, less than a minute, maybe 30 seconds, where you download this open source tool, which we call the emergency recovery tool, okay, which is widely distributed. It's on many servers. There are thousands of copies in circulation because thousands of people have downloaded and backed it up on USB sticks or whatever, and they have it on hand. It's a hash signed tool, right? And all you would do is just, you open the software, you type in your salt and phrase just as you would do on the device. And then it just calculates and just gives you all your private keys. And then you import, you know, the key for whatever currency you need to access into any other wallet, and voila. It would literally be like if tomorrow Bitfi was to just vanish, it would be as though nothing happened, right? Because the funds are in your mind. Everything is completely open source, not just this algorithm, but absolutely everything, right? Because again, people need to be able to verify what this code is doing, what is, you know, what's running on these devices, right? I mean, and of course, you know, there's a pretty big community, you know, watching what we do, right? Because I mean, you know, you have to absolutely be able to verify, because how do you know that all these features that I just told you are true, right? How do people know that, for example, like, you know, if we say, look, this device, okay, has absolutely nothing in memory. It is instantly gone the moment you complete a transaction. How do you know this is true, right? The reason you know that this is true is because, well, the first thing is of course, we understand that obviously majority of people are not, like tech people are not developers or whatever. So, you know, we understand that, but there is a big community of developers, and so you can see, right? The most important thing here is that this is all scientifically verifiable stuff, right? This is something that, you know, what I say either is or isn't true. It's not like subject to opinion, right? These are not like these things are not up for interpretation, right? When you say something like, you know, we guarantee that when you use this hardware, there will not be a trace of any data on this hardware after you use it, right? That is either, it's like, it's a binary statement. It's either true or false, right? It cannot be something in between, or it's just my opinion. So this is all verifiable in the open source tools and the code that is provided fully. You know, anyone can view it, or anyone can, and financial institutions, for instance, can of course, you know, do their own validation with their own teams and whatever. But yes, absolutely, this is critical, because if you feel that you depend on Bitfi when, you know, securing and using digital assets, then you're doing this all wrong. Okay, you need to go through. I mean, it's our job, you know, to think about these worst case scenarios, and it's the job of the user to understand that, look, this is a self-custody tech, right? So you have to go through and be like, okay, and ask all these questions, okay, and go through these scenarios, and possibly even, you know, practice doing it, right? To give yourself complete peace of mind. To, for example, you know, go through this scenario. Okay, well, all right, let's say you have a supply chain disruption. My device broke. You know, I dropped it in the bathtub. Well, actually, that wouldn't matter because it's waterproof. But okay, whatever. It broke somehow. And you know, and then, you know, Bitfi is on back order for the next 6 months because of us, you know, some kind of a chip shortage or whatever, right? So you need to kind of go through that and understand that, you know, this would be absolutely not an issue, and how you would do it, what you would do. It's actually very, very, very simple. It's built to be very, very easy, because again, it's just like a Bitcoin private key, right? So there's an address on the Bitcoin blockchain that has like over $10 billion worth of Bitcoin sitting at one address, okay? And the absolutely only thing that's needed to access that $10 billion worth of Bitcoin at that address is just the private key, right? That's all you need, right? No matter what happens, right? No matter what happens to anyone, to any company, to any entity, to any server, you will still be able to access that Bitcoin because you have the private key. It's the same here. No matter what happens, you always have access as long as you know your salt and phrase. That is all that is needed for access. That is the entire wallet. That is the wallet itself. It's the salt and phrase, just like the Bitcoin private key is essentially the wallet itself for, you know, that address on the Bitcoin blockchain, because that's all you need. If you have that, you have that 10 billion worth of Bitcoin. You don't have that, you have nothing. Same here. It's really truly the same concept. It's the same exact idea. You have that, you have everything. You don't have it, you have nothing. Okay?
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah. No, it makes sense. It makes me want to try it out. You do.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna try that. So I have another, well, two questions actually. I know that in the past, like way back when Bitfi first came out, there were some incidents of hacks. I'm not sure, was that user related or tech related? I would like to know what has been done. And also, would you recommend, for example, an encryption of this um, um, seed and password phrase that you have? Like, would you, as an extra layer of security, would you do that? Because I know, for example, with password managers, which is kind of similar in my mind, I would put it in the same box, because you have a master password that unlocks, you know, all your other passwords, and here you have this phrase that unlocks your funds to access it. So would you, in case of password managers, I know we typically recommend something extra that's only in your mind, so that in case people find your or hack, you know, your master password, there's still a layer of security there. Would you guys recommend that? Or
Well, I'll start with your first question. So you asked about, you know, some of the hacks that were reported in the very beginning. So first of all, I mean, this happened essentially, I don't know, like 2 weeks into the launch of the first version of Bitfi, or something like that, when it kind of started. And you know, John McAfee, who is a very illustrious figure in the space, as you know, got really excited about this, and really got very aggressive with, tweeting and essentially, saying that, look, this is like the only unhackable wallet ever. It's not possible to hack it. And of course, this drew a lot of attention from the hacking community. Okay, basically some of the best hackers in the world who really got provoked by, and I mean, his personality. I mean, he just kind of just egged these people on, and he just relentlessly kept going. And they're not interested in these other wallets. I mean, they have. I mean, it's not a challenge. They're not making such claims, and so no one's bothering them. And so they very quickly went to work to prove them wrong, and found several vulnerabilities. And so first, I think that it's a great thing that this happened. I mean, it was very unpleasant at the time. I mean, it was amazing to see what these people are capable of. I mean, truly astonishing. But first of all, I mean, we got basically, I mean, brutally attacked. I mean, our entire infrastructure, okay, everything. When you had large teams of hackers, collectively attacking this hardware, I mean, our entire, around the clock, okay? So, so the advantages first, as far as users are concerned, is that we learned about every possible vulnerability, like just in the first few weeks of the release of the first version of this technology. That I'm sure that a lot of wallet companies that certainly don't know about 5 years into their existence, because no one is attacking them this way, or this aggressively, or trying to actually prove a point. That it's all done very, if If, for instance, there are issues, it's all very cordial and very relaxed. This was not like that. This was literally like a nuclear war happening, McAfee versus the hackers. So we essentially, it was like, we're really battle tested, right? And it was like getting millions of dollars worth of, pen testing services and security testing. And then we took everything that we, learned during those attacks, and this was implemented in the Bitfi 2 with the release of the Bitfi 2, and no one's ever presented anything since, because we really took it to the extreme. Some of the methods that we use would be considered kind of insane or absurd for conventional electronics or other wallets. Like, for example, the entire device internally is filled with a thermal liquid resin, which then essentially turns the circuit board into a brick to make it impossible to alter or modify in any way. The data port has been eliminated, right? So of course, every hardware wallet, for the most part, has a data port, which means that, of course, anybody can connect something to it and inject it with code, and now you've got a modified wallet, right? Someone could easily open any hardware wallet and modify the circuit board, and now you're using you're using something modified that the attacker wants you to use, right? They can be easily altered. Counterfeit versions can be produced. This cannot be done with Bitfi 2, right? So it essentially pushed us to literally the extreme, right? We had to kind of approach wallet development kind of like Formula One, because we were just like, it was brutal. We had to, address every possible nuance, and that's what was done. So it's a tremendous benefit to the user, that you can be sure that all parts of our systems were very aggressively tested. But I'm happy to say that in spite of all that, there has not been a single user, not one human being to date since inception, who ever lost a penny due to a hack or exploit. Not one person. Okay, this cannot be said about any other wallet. And I don't mean just the Bitfi 2. I mean including the original version of the Bitfi 1. Now, I'm not saying it could never happen to somebody using the Bitfi 1, but it would still require, in other words, a simple way to explain it is as follows, right? So in both cases with the Bitfi 1 and Bitfi 2, if your device gets stolen or confiscated, neither will have any data. Attempting extraction is pointless. The attacker cannot get anything. However, with Bitfi 1, if the attacker gains access to your device when you're away from it, let's say you're away from it for 2 weeks, and the attacker gains access to the device, makes modifications to it, okay? Then you return, and the attacker hopes you don't notice that it's been modified because it looks the same and it was left in the same place. The attacker could, okay, access, sensitive information that way, because now you're using a modified device, okay? But again, I want to make it clear that with both Bitfi 1 and Bitfi 2, if the attacker gets their hands on the device after you've used it or after you've been using it, there's nothing that could be done to access funds because there's nothing there. With Bitfi 2, you also don't have to worry about this. These are kind of much more rare and exotic attacks where, let's say, someone gained access to the device when you were away from it and modified it somehow and you weren't aware, and then you used it and now, something leaked and now your money's gone. Okay, so Bitfi 2 covers those scenarios as well, okay? So we do have, I would say, an amazing track record that there's just, it's very simple. Just go online and look for yourself. You will see a bunch of victims and stories of people using other wallets. It's devastating. You will not find someone you know, saying that they lost funds using Bitfi because they got hacked or something like that. So I'm very pleased with that. Again, this is not some guarantee about the future, but you know, it's easy to see why. I mean, it's clearly more secure when you don't have you know, a piece of paper with 24 words lying around and a gadget with all your private keys. I mean, it's just not that hard to understand that. Just conceptually, it makes sense that this is, you know, it's much harder for an attacker to do something in this scenario. Oh, and on to your second question. Regarding, you asked about encrypting something. So again, the idea is to as a user, is to make sure that you know your Sultan phrase and that no one else does. Okay, so that means you should never, under any circumstances, ever type that Sultan phrase into any other hardware, into any computer, into anything, okay, except that your Bitfi to hardware, okay? Because in order to, like, you know, encrypt it or something, you'd probably have to, you know, type it into your smartphone or whatever, and that's a very insecure environment, right? That's where your Sultan phrase can leak. So you absolutely should never attempt to anything like that. If you want to have a backup because you're concerned about memory loss, you know, write it down in some clever way somewhere where no one would have a clue what it is. You know, get creative, okay? But, you know, write it down somewhere, your Sultan phrase, okay? Some people, you know, use something, you know, the reason the first input is called a salt, right, is because salt implies something you already know, meaning that you don't have to commit to memory. So for example, if you're using your phone number as the salt, okay, it's not quite as secure as something random, but it certainly slows down an attacker who, you know, might have gotten your phrase, right? So some people, for example, might write down their phrase, but not the salt because they know the salt. And some people might write down both, but get creative with that. But you absolutely never type either the, you know, the salt or the phrase into anything, because that is how it can leak. And if somebody gets their hands on your Sultan phrase, just like if they get their hands on your Bitcoin private key, your funds are gone, because that's all that is needed, right? So yeah, so either just, you know, start using it and kind of memorize it, or, you know, write it down and memorize it, or write it down, memorize it, and then eventually when you feel confident enough that you know your Sultan phrase as well as your own name, then maybe get rid of that piece of paper.
Thank you. I appreciate that reply, because, you know, I totally would have thought that a second layer of encryption maybe makes it more secure.
Well, remember that encryption is useful when you have data to protect. But here, there is no data to encrypt, to protect. There's nothing to encrypt, right? If you have data on some piece of hardware, yeah, you want to encrypt that. But if you don't have any data to begin with, there's nothing to encrypt. You don't need to encrypt because there's no data.
Well, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I think Chill's question was more towards the seed phrase in the salt, though, and not just leaving that around like in plain text format for someone. If you are going to write it down and not put it in your head, is it better to encrypt it? I would imagine it is, but I mean, it's still not the optimal way to do it.
To encrypt it, you'd need to type it into some piece of hardware, either a computer or a smartphone, right? And that's very unsafe, because people just don't realize how unsafe computers are. And just because nothing has happened or whatever, I mean, yeah, nothing has happened because you're not targeted. Once you have, like, you know, several $1 million worth of Bitcoin or a few $100,000, you will be targeted. It's not, you know, that's no joke. It's not like just because now you have a bunch of documents no one cares about and it never happened, I'm okay. No, you're not okay. And even if, there's a very small chance of something happening, you still wouldn't take it, right? I mean, why do people buy life insurance? It's not like nobody thinks they're going to die. They still buy life insurance because people want to cover these unlikely scenarios as well.
Right. Yep. Yep. No, it makes sense. Makes sense. Let's see. We got another question in the chat here. So I heard you say proprietary about the algorithm, but then I also heard you say open source. So I guess which parts are open source or which parts are proprietary? Like, is it possible for me to get my hands on the source code, or is that like, how does, what is it? Can you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, what I mean by proprietary meaning is that we are the ones that created this. We developed it. We are the only company in the world that made this happen. But it is everything is completely open source. The algorithm, everything is fully open source. So I guess it's not proprietary in the classic sense. Just what I mean is that this is Bitfi's proprietary technology that we developed, we came up with, and that there is only one such solution that currently exists and only available from Bitfi, but everything is completely open source.
So if I wanted to make my own chip and physical device, I could put the algorithm that takes a seed phrase and a salt on there, and it would do something similar. Probably not as well as what you all are doing, since you've put a lot of time and effort into it. But
well, we do have. I should clarify. We do have all this stuff in patent pending status.
Okay.
But we do, before anybody starts going, oh my God, patents. We do have a section on our website where we describe our position on patents and permissionless innovation, and that our patents are open for anybody that has legitimate use for this technology. Not to, in other words, they're only meant to protect from someone bastardizing this tech and just commercializing it purely for profit. Some company that could care less about blockchain and adoption or something like that, or using the technology in a way that would perhaps maybe even be harmful to people. So it's not meant to actually stop innovation or anything like that. So we do leave that open for legitimate uses and for companies that are really driving innovation forward. But yeah, everything is completely open source. And if somebody wanted to, do what you describe, if it was like a genuine effort to improve security for people, then you certainly could.
Okay. So would I need you to share that with me, or can I just go on your GitHub and get it?
You could just get it, not on GitHub, but right on our website. Like when you're on bitfi.com, right? There's a section for open source, right? And there you just download the folder and you get the complete open source for everything, current firmware.
Oh, yeah, their wallet source code right there on the website. I see it right there.
Everything, absolutely everything is there. And then that recovery tool, the emergency recovery tool, is also there.
Yep, there it is. Okay, got it. Awesome.
Yeah, and then there's another website that contains the emergency recovery tool, which is btknox.org, btknox.org. It's another place. So yeah, everything is completely open source. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, not important there in the chat. There's your answer. You asked and we delivered. So there you go. Head over to this website and get it right there. There's a nice button that says website, or it says source code, and that should be what you're looking for. All right. Well, cool.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
So obviously, I'm definitely gonna try it. I wanted to know, how does this compare with I'm sure you're familiar. These hybrid banks are using deep cold storage, where they, you even made a reference to it, that they split, the seed words into 3 different locations, and they store it in hardware wallet. And this to me sounds much safer, personally. So do banks currently looking into using Bitfi, and also do you think that it would be like a safer solution than doing the geographical location distribution?
Well, I mean, regarding that, we just announced, I mean, literally just in recent news, it was announced about our collaboration with XDC, which is purely an institutional grade protocol meant solely for institutions. So yes. When it comes to institutional use, so again, all stored data is vulnerable, period. If you have data that is stored on something, any medium, okay, it is vulnerable. If it's using some extraordinary level of encryption, its security is declining with time, okay? So if you take a conventional hardware wallet and you leave it on a shelf and it sits there, its security is just gradually declining, meaning that 2 years from now, it's less secure than it is today. 5 years from now, it's even less secure, right? Because it's storing data, and methods for data extraction are continuously improving. With this solution, you could leave the device on a shelf for 1,000,000 years. It doesn't have any data. There's nothing to extract. So if someone gets to it 1,000,000 years from now, there's still no data, nothing to extract, right? So it's easy to see that this is way more secure. However, when it comes to institutional use, multi-sig is no longer just an issue of security, right? Multi-sig is where you actually have organizational structures where you need multi-sig. You need several different individuals to authorize access, et cetera. So this is something that we would be enabling for institutional use, and for anyone's use if they feel like doing multi-sig with Bitfi, or with, let's say, even using Bitfi and then having possibly interacting with some other wallet if they want. These are all possibilities. But yes, it is something that's needed for that institutional environment due to just kind of the corporate structure, not purely from a security standpoint.
Gotcha. Yep. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. I'm trying to think here. I mean, yeah, it's very interesting. I like basically, and I'm just going to try and re-sum this up here, make sure I'm getting it correctly. But I mean, it's basically just a calculator. It takes 2 inputs and it calculates them. It gives you an output, and then you use that output to sign a transaction, and then it deletes everything and goes back to how it was before you put any of the outputs in. So it's really simple. I like the simplicity of it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I think that's something. I mean, I'm just already thinking about some of the older folks in our community. I feel like they would. I want to test it out and just see if that's something that might be a little bit easier for them to use, because that's a huge hurdle for them, trying to set up these ledgers and these trezors and all of that stuff, or even just a mobile wallet for whatever coin crypto they're getting into is tough. Oh, actually, I know I have a good question here, and then I think we're gonna maybe wind it wrap it up. We're over our hour here. I don't know how much time everyone has, but we'll wind it down here a little bit. I saw the list of supported cryptocurrencies on your website. What are the plans for adding new ones? Are you adding new ones? Is there somewhere we can go to make a request for one? How does that all work?
Yeah, we are adding more, but we are not adding as quickly as some of the other wallet companies, for various reasons. One is that, first and foremost, it's all about security, right? So any change, any modification, okay, is possibility of a glitch happening. which can cause all kinds of potential issues. So we do put, anything new through very, very extensive QC review. The second thing is that just keep in mind that these conventional hardware wallets, which is just basically a device that's, let's just say outside of your computer, connected to your computer with a cable. So it's just like running a bunch of apps on your computer, right? Or a Chrome extension or whatever. And it's basically, this external thing is just, used to sign with that, keys that it is storing, right? So oftentimes these wallet companies will just receive that app that you download to use that currency literally from the developers of that currency. So they don't actually even have to do anything. You just download the app and voila, and now you have support for this new currency and you're signing with this little gadget, right? In our case, we have to actually build the algorithm, right? A completely custom algorithm that will result in the appropriate key every time you put in whatever input you're using, right? So it definitely takes longer. It's a lot more work, and we couldn't request it. We couldn't just say, ask some blockchain project, hey, just send this to us, because they wouldn't. It's like they'd have to spend a lot of time learning how to do this. I mean, it's not practical, and so it's just more work. So we just can't add as quickly, and we also will not add quickly because we just will not cut corners on security. We will not expose users to some new firmware that wasn't very thoroughly tested and went through very, very extensive QC. So I'm sure ultimately, at the end of the day, people can sleep well at night, not have to worry about anything. Okay, I mean, you won't be as happy. You're always going to say you prefer there was support for more assets. People will always complain about that, but they're never going to have any security issues. So I'm sorry, that's just that's. We'll do everything we can to support more. We do want to support, more, and we get asked every day for more people. And so we are working on it, but it's just not going to roll out as quickly as you see from some of these other solutions.
Gotcha. Are you able to give us any hints of what's coming soon, or is that compromising the security?
That's just that. No, it's just that's really in the domain. I mean, I wouldn't even want to really, because I can get in trouble for saying
fair enough.
The CTO will go completely.
We're adding this, and then it doesn't come out for a year. Right. I got you.
And then I'll say something that and then we can't really commit to. So I'd rather not.
Fair enough. I had to ask. So let's see here. Last question. Someone's asking if there was going to be a Bitfi demo. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time today to go through that. Is there a place? Is there a video or somewhere on the website? If I wanted to see a demo of it or just somebody using it, is there somewhere I can go to see that?
Yeah, you know what? I can send you a link. Well, actually, yeah, I think it's on our website. There might be where we it's also me kind of taking people through it in a very easy to understand way. Let me just take.
Yeah, that'd be great.
If I can find it. So, so I think there's a.
I'm looking here too.
If you go to. Yeah, I wanted to kind of give it to you on the fly.
No worries. We can always add it into the description.
Yeah. So what I'll do is
change the description on the live stream video, so anyone watching it can just find it down below.
That's great. I'll just send you a link. I'll send you a link that you can post there, which really kind of walks through, which is like literally you could see like the live demonstration of how it's used, and then it's easy to kind of put all these concepts together and understand how it all works when you actually see it in action, and it'll really make a lot of sense and how it's actually very simple and elegant when you kind of get down to it. It's just a very simple and elegant solution that that others haven't approached it that way before. It's not rocket science. It's just it's very elegant in its implementation.
Yeah, no, it definitely sounds like it. It definitely sounds like it. Chill, do you have any parting thoughts for us, or you good?
No, I just want to thank you for your time, and I really appreciate you breaking all this down for us.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure talking to you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as well quite a bit, and I'm excited to test it out here and see what it's all about. Any last parting thoughts or words, or other than that, I think we're going to wrap it up.
Well, buy Bitcoin. What else is there to say?
There we go.
Yeah.
It's been exciting.
Thank you,
All right. It's a pleasure, guys. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Yeah. Thanks, Daniel.
All right.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.